This is a special moment in the life of our republic. We have an opportunity to stand back from more than 200 years of our history, to evaluate our civic health, and to recommit ourselves to a government that is intentionally limited, to powers that are intentionally distinguished and divided. That's what these next few weeks are actually about. Arguably, the most important thing the U.S. Senate will do this year is confirm the next Supreme Court justice. I want to focus my opening remarks around the simple image of a judge's black robe. It's a strange thing that judges wear robes. You people are odd. But it isn't something that we should just look past as an odd convention. It's something that we should look right at. It's not some relic from history that people wore long ago in an era of formality, like a powdered wig. So why do the robes exist, unfashionable and unattractive as they often are? The reasons are better summed up by a current sitting judge than I might be able to put them. And so I quote, "Donning a robe doesn't make me any smarter, but the robe does mean something. It's not just that I can hide the coffee stains on my shirt. It serves as a reminder of what's expected of us, what Burke has called the cold neutrality of an impartial judge. It serves, too, as a reminder of the relatively modest station we're meant to occupy in a democratic society. In other countries, judges might wear scarlet. Here, we're told to buy our own plain black robes, and I can attest to the standard choir outfit of the local uniform supply store as a good deal. Ours is the judiciary of an honest black polyester," close quote. The author of these insightful words sits before us, Judge Neil Gorsuch. And that statement is an excellent lens through which to view the work of the committee this week, and indeed the work of the court over the next century and beyond. I want to make three simple overlapping points about that judge's black robe. One, it changes the way that our eyes see the court. Two, it reiterates the calling of a judge to the judge. And three, it gives us a special opportunity to teach our kids something about their Constitution, the enduring paper that defines what our government can and cannot do. First then, how does it change the way we see the court? When you look at the 9 justices sitting together in their robes, they blend in with one another. It's hard to tell them apart if you squint, and thus it calls attention to the office rather than to the person. That's because when the judge puts on his or her robe, it forces their personalities into the background so that we can focus on the important but the modest job that they have to do, which is to drill down on facts and law. Facts are objective. They don't change based on your personality. They're evaluated against written objective laws, not against what the judge wishes the law said. Someone famously said that, quote, empathy, close quote, is an essential ingredient in arriving at a just decision. This belief is well meant, but it's very foolish. For standing before a court, your gender, your skin, your bank account cannot decide your fate. In the same way, a judge's race, class, and gender should not decide your fate. Empathy is actually not the role of a Supreme Court justice. It is, in a sense, our role, for we are men and women who've been hired and can be fired by the American people to empathize. We're to identify with the hopes and the struggles of 320 million Americans. But the judge, instead, has a different job, to faithfully and dispassionately apply the law to the facts of the particular case. The judge's robe is there to remind the judge and us of that if the facts are on your side, it shouldn't matter which judge you sit before. Our ideal is one where you can trade out one judge for another judge, and you should get the same outcome. This is the heart of what we mean when we say that we believe in the rule of law, not of men, or of women, or of black or white, or rich or poor. We are not to be ruled by a judge's passions, or by a judge's empathy, or by a judge's policy preferences. Here's the second thing that the black robe is supposed to do. It's supposed to reiterate the calling of the judge back to the judge. By way of loose analogy, many people across our country sat in church pews yesterday morning and listened to someone preach from behind a big wooden pulpit wearing a robe. Why the pulpit? Why the robe? Because these things make it harder to see the preacher. They help us all understand that yesterday morning, for those of us in that tradition, knew that it was not about the messenger, but about the message that was being passed on from above. It was also to remind the minister of the same cloaking. Likewise, a good judge on the bench knows that. It's not about you, so don't make it about you. I said that it's only a loose analogy because, of course, the job of a Supreme Court justice is absolutely not to deliver some eternal word from God. It's rather to interpret a man-made written constitution as objectively and faithfully as they can, inserting their opinions as little as possible. When you put on your robe, you're cloaking your personal preferences. You're cloaking your partisan views. There's not a red robe for Republicans. There's not a blue robe for Democrats. We issue here only black robes. This brings us to the third and final point, which is that the judge's robe is also to teach our kids how they should understand their Constitution. As all of us learned in Schoolhouse Rock, the judiciary is not only a separate branch of government from the president and the Congress, but it's also a co-equal one. We have different functions, but we have the same responsibility to be upholding and to teach the Constitution. As a co-equal, the court can examine whether the actions of the other two branches are in fact unconstitutional. Time and again, at important moments in our nation's history, the court has struck down laws passed by the Congress or put a stop to a president's executive actions. Here's what that means. The primary job of the Supreme Court is not to uphold the will of the majority of the moment. The primary job of a Supreme Court justice is not to reflect the popular opinions of the day. That might sound surprising. Don't we live in a democracy where the majority is supposed to rule? The answer to that question is only a very qualified yes, for there are critical limits to that statement. The Constitution is a decidedly and intentionally anti-majoritarian document. The Constitution exists to protect our rights and our liberties, even when we might hold unpopular views. And the role of the Supreme Court in protecting those rights and liberties sometimes precisely to frustrate the will of the majority. Think about how the Constitution deals with religion and public opinion. The First Amendment prohibits the government from establishing any state religion, and it guarantees that every citizen can worship or not worship however their conscience dictates. If, however, at some moment polling showed a 51% popular desire in this country to pass a law making church attendance mandatory or to subsidize a particular religious denomination, the Supreme Court would rightly strike down such flawed laws. This is because in the Constitution, we decided that we would limit our own power. We, the people, decided in the founding of this republic that we would restrain our own majoritarian impulses. By enacting the Constitution, we intentionally decided to tie our own hands so that there are certain things that a majority can never do, like invade someone's conscience. And if the majority, in its arrogance, should at some point in the future seek to cross that line, the Supreme Court will rightfully shout no. When Congress passes an unconstitutional law, it is in fact the Congress that is violating the long-term will of the people. For the judiciary is there to assert the will of the people as embodied in our shared Constitution over and against that unconstitutional, but perhaps temporarily popular law. Each branch serves the people, but in unique ways. It is the job of the Congress and the president to act. It is the job of the court often to react. Each branch holds the others in check. Each branch faithfully seeks to uphold and teach the Constitution. Each branch serves the American people, but with distinct offices. When a Supreme Court justice puts on his or her robe, we don't want them confusing their job of other branches. We want them policing the structure of our government to make sure that each branch does its job, but only its job. Today, Judge Gorsuch sits in front of us wearing a suit and tie. Before he can put back on the black robe, he must answer this committee's questions. And I expect that Mr. Gorsuch, the citizen, has policy preferences. He probably has desired outcomes, but I don't know what they are, and that's a good thing. And I expect by the end of this week, it should be clear that Judge Gorsuch, the judge's judge, will faithfully embody the spirit of that black robe. For the American people deserve the comfort of a judiciary that is cold and impartial, not seeking to be super legislators. For if a judge seeks to be a super legislator, he or she should run for office so the American people can choose to hire them or fire them. But that is not the calling you have before us today. Thank you, and thank you to your family for being willing to endure this calling and this service and this hearing.